We are recording. We are recording. And this time I can't hear it, so I think we should be good. Hopefully everything is working. So let's start it up in 3, 2, 1. Go. Hello and welcome to this week's Eco Show. I think we might be on number 12 at this point. Welcome. I hope you're having a good week so far in March. It is March 23rd when I'm recording this. So we've got we'll be talking about an animal, as always. We'll be talking about some news and research. We're kind of back to the research wagon this week. I found some nice research articles that were pretty easy for me to read and digest. And I think I may have figured out the sound situation. So hopefully it's not as, there's a lot of feedback last week. Not feedback from people. Feedback in the sound. Which, speaking of which, if you have any feedback, feel free to post it publicly or tell it to me in private or think about it and send it to me via brain waves. Okay? So that's about the housekeeping things for today. What I'm trying to do is hold the mic closer to my mouth, which I think is going to make me even more congested. I have taken an allergy pill today, so I don't know if that'll have any benefit. Hope you're having some good weather wherever you are, or that you're having some bad weather if it's good for the wider environment. As long as you're semi-comfortable, a little bad weather is okay sometimes. I like rainy weather. Something about it makes me feel like my brain is working better. I don't know why. It just does. Okay. So welcome to Ego Show. We talk about an animal of the week. Get you some good in-depth knowledge on an animal that you probably know, but you can guarantee there's probably going to be some information about it that you won't have heard before. And that seems to be related to either mating or pooping. That's sort of usually where the interesting information comes out. And then we talk about an animal of the week, and we talk about some research articles and some news in the world of eco things and ecology. I'm Henry. I do this thing, and I'm also a grad student currently studying ecology. So that's what's going on. Yeah, we didn't have any we had the Willow Pipeline last week was pretty big environmental news. There wasn't as much big mainstream news this week, but there was some good news. So that's nice to look into, and we're a bit more researchy back this week. But they were all articles that I thought were pretty easy to follow and were pretty animal related. So a bit more research this week, but I think that will be enjoyable. Okay. So let's hop in. The animal of the week this week is the sea turtle. There are 7 existing species: the flatback, green, hawksbill, leatherback, loggerhead, Kemp's Ridley, and olive Ridley sea turtles. And we're going to be talking particularly about the green sea turtle this week, which is the one in Finding Nemo, I believe. Radical dude. Okay, its scientific name is Chelonia or Chelonia mitis, and it's also known as black turtle or the Pacific green turtle. It ranges from tropic to subtropical seas around the world. I'll put an image here of its range, which is, it really just looks like a band, a big belt around the middle of the earth. They have a large carapace, and a carapace is apparently what their shell is called. And they have large paddle-like flippers. So if you don't know what a sea turtle is, those are two key defining features of it. A turtle, if you don't know a turtle, turtles look like tortoises, but they're in the water and they usually have flippers. So welcome to this planet if you're just hearing about turtles. They're mostly... I do have a lisp, and sometimes it comes out more strongly than other times. They are mostly herbivorous. Words like mostly really bring it out. I think when you have to go from the S to the L, gets emphasized. I'd be good in Spain, maybe, learning Spanish. Because I think there's lots of ths in it, lots of th sounds. I'm already getting pretty sidetracked this early in. Buckle up, folks. I'm going to try and stay on track. Okay, they're mostly herbivorous. They're usually in shallow lagoons, and they feed on seagrass in those shallow lagoons. And they just bite off the tips of the grass, which actually helps keep the seagrass healthy. So they are ecosystem engineering animals by trimming at the seagrass. In a research article that we talked about a few episodes ago, we were actually talking about how in some cases sea turtles are not great. If they are isolated in a particular area, then they may eat that seagrass a little bit too low. So you gotta let them move around. They migrate long distances from where they feed to where they breed. Sometimes that can be up to 2,600 kilometers, which will be some number of miles. That's probably around 2,000. It's a lot of miles, it's a lot of kilometers. And in this breeding time, the females will crawl onto beaches, dig nests, and lay eggs in the night. Oh, yeah. I had actually forgotten about this, but this is the pretty wild information, and it has to do with mating. So, which I guess is just something about mating. Mating, eating, and pooping, I guess, is just where all animals are so different. And every animal looks different, but when it comes to mating and pooping, everyone does it, but everyone does it in very different ways, which is a really cool aspect of life. Okay, so this mating process, females will go onto the beach, and oftentimes they themselves will have been born on that beach. So sea turtles tend to return to where they hatched. And this is the wild part. Females will have a clutch size between 85 and 200. And that, I'm sure, is a video that I feel like I have seared into my memory from being a young child. And there were many eggs. And that's about that. But so from these eggs, hatchlings will emerge. And they will scramble to the water as quickly as they can. That I also remember having seared as a childhood memory is hatchlings running to the ocean and trying to evade seabirds. The ones that do make it to the water and reach maturity may get to 90 years old, but you can expect a high mortality rate in those younger years, but they can get quite old and pretty big, up to 315 kilograms, which would be over 600 pounds. Actually, probably close to over 700 pounds, maybe. But yeah, at least 600 pounds. So that's pretty big. And let's see, they are listed as endangered by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, the IUCN. They're the ones that give those rankings. It's usually illegal to collect, harm, or kill them, but they're still in danger due to human activity, since turtles and eggs are hunted for food, and pollution and fishing nets harm them. We'll talk a little bit in a moment about why fishing nets in particular are harmful, because you'd think they're an ocean dwelling species, so they could survive long enough in the net for them to be released if they were accidentally caught. Also, real estate development causes habitat loss and eliminates nesting beaches. So that's an issue which is ongoing, but which I have a feeling may shift, hopefully, as well. I'm not hoping that sea level rises, but sea level is rising, which seems like it will lead to less real estate development on beaches. But people love living on the beach. It's nice. It's nice living near a beach. I don't want to be living on a beach anymore, though. I'd like to have like a building on stilts near a beach, maybe, so little baby turtles can still run around. Other names for the sea turtle, because it does range around the world, as we'll have shown on the map, include honu in Hawaii. There are really big populations. The biggest populations related to the United States are in Hawaii and Florida, and the largest populations around the world are in the Great Barrier Reef and the Caribbean Sea. Pirates of the Caribbean. I don't know if they had any turtles featuring in Pirates of the Caribbean, but they would have been there. Maybe that's what Jack Sparrow would have eaten on the island that he was on. The island of Ascension, it might be Ascension, in the South Atlantic. Put an image of where that is. Hosts 6,000 to 13,000 turtle nests each year. I'll put a photo of what that looks like. Although the adults are just out there eating seagrasses, hatchlings are carnivorous and will eat pretty much whatever they can get their tiny mouths on. And in general, sea turtles have a slow growth rate because of the low nutritional value of the seagrass that they eat so much. And the green sea turtle is called that not because of its shell, but because of actually a layer of fat that is, I think it's not actually visible unless you're eating it. And so a lot of people were eating it back in the day, so they would have known that it was green, and it gets green because of all the seagrass that they eat. The only animals that hunt sea turtles are humans and tiger sharks. And those tiger sharks are in Hawaii. That's besides the juvenile turtles, which are eaten by crabs, small marine mammals, and shorebirds. Okay, some more interesting information. I mean, this is all interesting information, but information that you might not have known is that the biggest disease threat to sea turtles is fibropapilloma, and it produces a lethal tumor. And it's caused by a herpes virus transmitted by leeches. So you can imagine an animal like a sea turtle going through shallow waters in seas around the world, going through grasses. They'd be prime for being colonized by different insects and leeches and insects and things. But they have some good relationships with fish in reefs in different areas, and they'll often have these parasites and barnacles and things cleaned off and eaten by little fish. I'll try to find a photo of a little fish eating the something off of a turtle. They spend almost all of their life submerged and in water. And when they dive for food and things, they can dive for 4 to 5 minutes, but they can sleep for hours at a time. And so this is getting back to the death related to fishing, being caught up in fishing lines, is that they tend to be able to stay underwater for much less time when they are stressed and when they're exerting a bit of energy. So you can imagine being caught in a net would be very stressful, and it would be trying to escape. So they drown because they are likely using more oxygen and getting stressed more quickly. Oh, this is also very interesting. Really cool. Is that they have an internal magnetic compass. So that's thought to be one of the ways that they're able to find their way back to where they were born. And they have this magnetic compass due to magnetic crystals in their brains. So that is a pretty cool image to think of. It makes it feel like a pretty magical creature to think of it having magnetic crystals in their brains. And that's about all of the information that we have for the sea turtle, for the green sea turtle this week. I'll come back to do some of those other turtles another time. There's some pretty interesting sounding ones in there. And yeah, let's mosey on. I'm going to put a marker here for myself. I'm waving to myself to put a timestamp. I didn't do this last week, but I might this time, so that people can know if they're tired of listening to information about sea turtles, they can jump straight to the research. Okay. And all of the research this week is from the Journal of Animal Ecology. And we've got lots of good stuff here. It's the Journal of Animal Ecology, so it's all animal related. We've got 3 articles. One relates to seals. One relates to moose. Oh, I remember this from being a child, of wondering what the plural form of moose is. It might be meese. I think that's what I would say. Back in the day, meeses. So one article about seals, one article about meeses, and one article about Arctic foxes. So we've got a good spread of very charismatic animals. So you want to be in the loop on this one. So the first article, there wasn't any finding that was particularly interesting, but I thought it was a cool long-term study to talk about, because that's a big part of science, and they aren't usually that glamorous, but it's pretty impressive when a study goes on for a long time. So this first article was about a long-term study of Weddell seals, and it's particularly cool because it's often hard to get consistent funding in science over long periods of time. But when you've been doing it for a long enough time, then I think you might build up some momentum. And so the study of Weddell seals is down in Antarctica, which I'll put on a map. Again, if you are new to the planet, welcome. Antarctica is a very cold place at the bottom of the earth. if you're viewing the Earth from a north-south biased perspective. But if you're from another planetary system, it might be the top of the Earth. Either way, it's the big area that is white and has solid ground. There's a big area that's white on the top, but you'll probably know that it does not have solid ground right at the top. Okay, so this long-term study has been going on since the 1960s, and it's really close to two of the main big Antarctica research centers, and those are McMurdo and Scott bases. They're in some, I don't know. I'll put that we'll put up an image of where those bases are in Antarctica. And this seal is the southernmost living mammal. So that is pretty impressive for these chunky little guys. And I haven't put up a photo. Here's a photo of a Weddell seal. That'll be up. And this long-term study is looking at vital rates. And vital rates in ecology or in animal biology are usually talking about information relating to birth, death, immigration, and emigration. So it may have sounded like I said the same word twice. One starts with an I, immigration, and the other one starts with an E, immigration. I think we should pronounce them that way. Maybe. They wouldn't sound as good, but it would be clearer what we're saying. And that just means who's coming and who's going, basically. Immigration, emigration, who's coming, who's going this lifetime, birth and death, who's coming and who's going into the next realm of existence. So that's what vital rates is talking about, and that's what they're looking at. And this is important to understand, particularly for an animal like this that is the lowest main mammal in the area. It's important to understand these rates because they'll often relate to the ecosystem around. So if you're keeping track of these vital rates for a population for a long time, you can get an understanding of how their population size influences the surrounding environment and how the surrounding environment influences their population size. So it may seem like, why are people paying so much attention to seals? But it can tell you a lot about the surrounding conditions for their survival and for the survival of other things. Okay, it's in Erebus Bay, I believe. Yeah, so the area that has been studied is in Erebus Bay, which I'll put up a photo of. It's near those bases. And they have no above ice predators, which sounds like a great way to live. If you're anything besides a human and like an apex predator, you've got people wanting to, people and things wanting to eat you all the time. But at least if you are a Weddell seal, you know when you're above ice, you are in the clear. Unless you're a Weddell seal in the 1930s/40s/50s, kind of anything before the 50s, they were harvesting, they were eating a lot of these seals and feeding them to the sleigh dogs at these Antarctic stations. So they've since banned and stopped doing that, but back in the day it would not have been a fun time. But now it's a little bit more relaxed. And we'll put a photo of a very relaxed and happy looking Weddell seal right here. Let's see. Okay, and so from this long-term study, some of the interesting information that we have is that 80% of females have no offspring, and the remaining 20% of females have from 1 to 23 pups. So that's a lot of kids. And part of the reason that few females have no offspring is that there is a very low survival rate for pups and yearlings. So there's just not a huge number of females that are making it to maturity where they can have pups. There's also some information talking about how the younger that the female seal is, the younger they are when they start having pups, the more it sort of impacts their health and quality of life, or how long they live, because that will impact the sort of their own body development and their own accrual of fat, and sort of the more fat and development you're able to get to, the more likely you're going to be able to live for a long time. But if you have pups younger, then energy that would be going towards your own physical growth will be going towards the gestation of these seal pups. And to give you an idea of how extensive this research is, at the end of 2021, there were 306,000 encounters of 27,000 unique individuals. So that's 300,000 data points and information about 27,000 unique individuals. So that is a lot of field work over a lot of time, and a lot of information being captured there about those little folks. They tag them. I think tagging was the main thing to keep track of them over time. And that's about that on that. So just some good long-term ecological research info going on there for you. Okay, I'm doing really well this time. I'm remembering to put a hand up to put in timestamps. So I may actually do that this time. All right. We're on to our next. Okay, and the title of that research paper was Patterns, Sources, and Consequences of Variation in Age-Specific Vital Rates. Insights from a Long-Term Study of Weddell Seals by J.J. Rotella, or Rotella. I don't know if the L's are pronounced or not. Our next research article, I'm going to read the title at the start so I don't forget, and it doesn't give too much away. It's titled Behavioral Responses of a Large Heat-Sensitive Mammal to Climatic Variation at Multiple Spatial Scales. That's by Tana L. Verzuh et al. That first article was not an et al. That was just JJ all the way. But this one, Tana was working with folks. But really, we're all et al. In this life. We're all collaborators with other people in the writing of our own personal stories. Anyways, okay, this research article is about moose or mises or whatever their plural is. And it's relating to what do animals do to regulate their body temperature. And this is something that we all do every day, but that we talk about, but we don't necessarily think about it so much. But all animals have different strategies for keeping themselves cool. One of the big ways that humans keep themselves cool is by sweating, which puts water out your body, and then the evaporation of that water off of your body cools you down. I ought to know some more specifics about that, but I can't really talk about it. Another thing that animals will do is pant, like your dog, or like somebody's dog that you may know that pants. And panting is not wearing pants, even though I have seen some dogs in like costume pants. But this is panting like tongue out, going like, and doing that. So animals will do that to keep themselves cool. And this article is about moose, which are very large. Okay, here's our photo of a moose. And they're a huge animal, which you'd think would benefit from sweating, but it does not sweat. So it needs to pant. That's the one thing that it can like directly do to keep itself cool. And this article is about other things, exploring other things that it does to keep itself cool. And by finding out where they travel to and things like that, they found that moose tend to look for areas to stay bedded, which are places to chill out, which may be cool or wet areas. And during daylight hours, I believe this was in the summertime, moose would stay bedded 67% of the time to stay cool. And shade is usually enough to stay cool enough for them, up to 10 degrees Celsius, which is like about 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and wet soil will keep them cool up to 20 degrees Celsius, which is about 70 or so degrees Fahrenheit. And much above 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 degrees Celsius, it gets pretty dangerous for moose because they do not sweat, and the only thing that they can do is pant to stay cool. But, imagine being in a desert, and the only thing that you can do to stay cool, like you're wearing a plastic bag, and all you can do to stay cool is panting. That's not going to keep you very cool, is it? Especially when the air is warm outside, then it's just going to feel awful. And I imagine that they don't have sweating because they live up in these really cold areas. So it probably, I would suspect it would keep you warmer in places that are cold. And this is why it's dangerous, I think, for animals to be, it's dangerous for anybody to be in a closed car on a hot day, but why dogs get overheated really quickly, I think, is because I believe they can only pant. But I'm not completely sure. Sounds right, though, doesn't it? Yeah, I'm agreeing with myself. Okay, and so this research found that by looking at where moose go, they tend to select cool places to be across the landscape. And they are well known for liking riparian areas, which riparian just means river sort of areas, for vegetation. But these areas may also be important to stay cool for them. So they might not only be staying around river areas because of the food, but also because they're wet, there's sources of shade and things like that for them. And this research is important because the areas that they live are projected with climate change to get hotter and drier. And so when you've got a hotter and drier environment, that is going to be no good for trying to live your life and stay cool, especially when you rely on wet areas like moose do to stay cool. So this could lead to them possibly having to shift ranges further north, which may be cooler, but maybe less vegetated. And that was a cool aspect of this one, is I hadn't really thought of. You hear about heat impacting mammals or animals, and their survival, but you don't think of, and you think of animals needing water, but I didn't think so much before of animals needing water sources just to stay cool. So we now know that. Okay, and we're on to our next article, and the article titles, I must say, in Journal of Animal Ecology, they're my favorite article titles because they don't give away too much information. They make you read it. And so I can read it just to the start and not ruin the whole story that the thing is going to tell. Okay, and so we're on to our last research article, which is titled Predator Co-Occurrence in Alpine and Arctic Tundra in Relation to Fluctuating Prey. And that's by Lars Rød-Eriksen et al. And the O has a slash through it. So go ahead and let me know what the O with the slash means through it. It doesn't matter if somebody else has commented the answer. You can comment the same answer as them. You can come up with your own answer. Just comment something. Okay. Yeah, and so I read the title of that article, and I've already gone through this article, and none of what I read stuck in my mind. But it felt important, didn't it? Okay, so I'm just going to read that again and a little bit slower. Predator co-occurrence, and so co-occurrence is things happening and existing together. So we're talking this article about multiple predators living together in alpine and Arctic tundra. And so alpine tundra, talking about high, mountains and hills and things like that, and Arctic, you can be alpine and Arctic at the same time, but they made it two separate things. So they're kind of talking about flat areas, but maybe not. Maybe Arctic is something else in relation to fluctuating prey. So what this article is talking about is when you have the food is fluctuating for multiple predators, and particularly predators that live in cold and mountainous areas, what is going to change about what predators are going to be dominant and hanging around. So this system in particular, I'll introduce the main characters. You can imagine, and I'm not going to make a figure for this, but I will put a photo of each of one of these characters. Our first character is the wolverine, which we can think of as being a major predator in this study area. And the wolverine, I'm not going to say anything about because that would be a great one for an animal of the week. But you see what it looks like. It looks pretty tough. It's not the guy. It's not the X-person guy. And our other character is the golden eagle. I'll put a photo of that. It doesn't look golden at all. It's totally an awful name for it. It's a brown eagle. But for whatever reason, people don't like just calling something brown. But maybe it is golden. I don't think it is. Anyways, there's going to be a photo of it, and that will tell us the answer to that great question. But in this research, those are the two top of the line predators. And then below that, we have what are called mesopredators, and they're a bit more sort of scavengy. And so those ones are foxes, Arctic foxes, and red fox. And the red fox is slightly bigger than the Arctic fox. And so this research is interested in how does changing the prey for all of these hungry predators, how does that impact the dynamics of these different predators? And I'll say now, before I read my notes, is that the findings were that it's not very clear what the interactions are. So if it feels confusing, it is confusing, and it's a little bit all over the place. So I've given you a little bit of the answer, but let's get into some of what they were finding. So when you have large carnivores, they can influence the ecosystem by suppressing these lower carnivores. But they can also provide carrion, which is just leftover meat for these mesopredators. So if you think of our wolverines and golden eagles, their existence in the ecosystem may suppress activity of our red foxes and golden foxes because they scare them off. And these ultimately red foxes and Arctic foxes could be prey for these wolverines. But wolverines and these golden eagles are also going to leave a lot of food behind. So that could actually increase the number of Arctic foxes and red foxes there are. So that's weird thing number one that makes a system like this really hard to predict. And let's see. So what's our next sort of thing? And in this area, they were seeing that the Arctic fox has decreased in its population size, and the red fox, which is a little bit bigger, but still isn't one of those main carnivores, it has increased, and it's a little bit bigger. So let's get some more findings going on. And just a note on methods, they used trap cameras in order to see who was where and when. So trap cameras are good, but there can be lots of gaps in that information as well. The main prey that they were keeping an eye on were small rodents. And I'll put an image of this area. It's the Scandinavian tundra, which used to have which used to have wolves, but those wolves are no longer in the area. So part of me thinks, I wonder how much of this system is out of whack because of the lack of wolves. Because you can think of wolves going for things like maybe caribou or deer that would have been up there, and then golden eagles and wolverines going in to eat, and then everybody sort of having their turn to have a little munch going on. But now, because there aren't any gray wolves, and I get the feeling that caribou are a little bit too big for wolverines and golden eagles, that they're all having to scrounge over smaller prey, which is what's making things complex. So they found that there were more red fox. They found red fox co-occurring with wolverines and golden eagles. And they saw that the Arctic fox, which is smaller, it responded well to small rodent abundance, and it responded more strongly to that than the red fox. And the Arctic fox co-occurred with the other predators at carcasses when rodent abundance was low. So there was a lot of complex things going on there, and there wasn't a clear-cut answer to really what was happening. So apologize for that, but we can start to think of it and put your theories in this below. And if you want to go read the paper, maybe you've come to some ideas of this. So we've got rodents, and I'll be honest, I'm not really sure what the carcasses are of. I think there are caribou up there, but I think that's a big gap that's lacking from my notes. So I apologize for that. But let's say these are caribou carcasses. Why do you think that the red fox co-occurred more with larger predators? Maybe the red fox is big enough that it's not at a large threat of being eaten by these big guys. Yeah. Well, at the very least, hopefully you enjoyed some cute photos of some of these animals. Okay. And in particular, there was one summary point, is that golden eagle recovery could negatively impact the Arctic fox. So that's what they're getting at there, is that because these systems are so complex, when you have an animal that is a priority for regeneration, like the golden eagle apparently is a priority to recover in that area, but Arctic foxes are bite-sized enough for them that they intimidate and possibly eat the Arctic fox. And then you may have a situation where your Arctic fox is in danger. So always be aware of what predators are eating and what might be the knock-on effects of that. I say reintroduce wolves. Oh, and I wrote some other summary points. Maybe that's why I was so confused. Okay. I said at the start of this, it's going to be confusing. And I was talking to myself apparently as well, because there was a light at the end of the tunnel and I didn't think it was there, but I've made it to it now. So the impact of the wolverine was apparently unclear. Yeah, because the density was too low, possibly to really have a big impact across the ecosystem. So I think their populations are coming back, but there is a low number of them overall. So they were sort of saying like, yeah, the wolverines are probably having an impact, but there's not really enough of them to get enough good information on what their impact would have been like. They also noted that gray wolf would have a similar role to the wolverine in the area, but they are no longer there. And yeah, okay. Oh, this feels good. I love some good, clean summary. And so we talked about before, one of the results was that the red fox co-occurred with these other predators. So these large predators may have a low impact on red fox in terms of eating them or predating on them. And so it may invade tundra habitat. So the red fox may be more comfortable populating out this habitat, and that may threaten the Arctic fox by outcompeting it. And all this information can help ecosystem management in these areas. Wow. We got there in the end, folks. We got there in the end. And before I say anything else confusing, I'm going to hop to the news. And here I'm putting my hand up. So this is mostly for people who are watching on YouTube. But if you're listening to the podcast, that is really awesome. And I hope this has been clear enough. I'm at least trying to be aware of when something is going to be confusing and hard to follow, and pointing that out. So if you stuck around, that's fantastic. I think that. I had a research article a couple weeks back that was also really confusing and muddy to get through. So you're a rock star. And I hope that my camera is still recording. Yeah, it's still recording. So I still have I still have room on this phone, but we're getting to that point where I will not be able to process this video if I go for much longer. So let us get to the news. There's an ocean conference. There's a big ocean conference. And there were 341 commitments made worth $20 billion. So we're wrapping up with some good news today. 341 commitments worth $20 billion. And funding was for expanding and improving marine protected areas. And there's been $108 billion raised so far. And this was at the Our Ocean Conference. Panama hosted this, and Panama added 35,000 square miles of protected area, which I'm not sure in square kilometers, but it was maybe, that might be around like 20 or something, 25 maybe, square kilometers of protected. 35, okay, and this is 35,000 square miles. So we're doing this thing again. So the square root of 35 is, we can say that's about 6. So that's an area that is 6,000 by 6,000 miles. Is that right? I hope I'm right this time. Yeah, 6 times 6 is 36. So 6 million, or 6,000 times 6,000 is about 36. So that's a big area. So 35,000 square miles is like it wasn't just, I'm sure it wasn't just a square, but that's like a square that's 6,000 miles by 6,000 miles. I feel like that's got to be wrong, but let's hope it's not wrong. Could it be 600? Okay, sorry folks, I have to do this again. I have to do a calculation. 600 times 600. I really honestly just don't think to do this beforehand. Okay, 600 by 600 is 360,000. Okay, wow. I'm really glad that jeez, holy mackerel. That would have been bad before. Okay, so let's see. 35. Wow, how embarrassing. It's not embarrassing. We're just learning new things. How do we get this? Let's do square root of 35. Okay, that's a little bit more like it. Okay, the square root of 35,000 is 187 flat. No 187,000. All right, that's a lot more understandable. I'm glad that it's always good to check your numbers, and this is a good reason for that. This show is just showing how poor my mental math is. Holy moly. Okay. So the square that was protected is 187 miles by 187 miles, which is still is a large area, but it's not a 6,000 mile by 6,000 mile square. Holy moly. Okay. Wow. My brain is mush at this point. Okay, some more interesting information. These additional areas of protected area were in Banco Volcan Marine Protected Area in the Caribbean Sea. You can comment below. What's the right way to say it? Caribbean or Caribbean? And I'll let you figure out how to point out what you're saying in the comments. And I'll put a photo of what this marine protected area looks like. I think it's supposed to be a pretty amazing area because it has deep sea mountain ranges and high biodiversity. And this will bring ocean protection to 54% of Panama's economic zone, which is pretty impressive sounding. They also are intending to stop more than 160,000 tons of plastic from being imported and consumed. This is by eliminating single-use plastics like cups and utensils, plastic packaging, and virgin plastic. There are also commitments to help protect 30% of oceans by 2030 from other people at this conference, and they are wanting to protect there was emphasis to connect to protect Eastern Tropical Pacific Coalition. Eastern Tropical Pacific Coalition announced funds to strengthen marine protections for a marine corridor over 193,000 square miles, which I'm not going to do the math on because we can assume that it's a lot, but it's not going to be as much as it seems like it should be. That's what we found from doing that last little thing. Okay, there's actually 3 news pieces. And so our second news piece is about lions. I'll put a photo of these lions. They're lions in the Indian state of Gujarat. And this is the only place outside of Africa where lions are still in their natural habitat. And numbers have increased here so much that some will need to be relocated to a new wildlife sanctuary to expand their territory and ensure growth. This northern lion subspecies lives from West Africa to India, but only in India now. And these included the now extinct Barbara, put a photo of the Barbara lion, and the Caspian lion, which sounds pretty cool. And speaking of big cats, Iran is the only other place with a big cat, or is not the other place, but they are the only place with Asiatic cheetahs. And the cheetah used to be in India, but it was made extinct. And this area where the lions are in India is called Gir National Park, with 544 square miles of lion territory. In 2015, the lion population was 523. In 2010, it was 411. And 359 in 2005. So they are growing pretty quickly. So much so that they need to put them into another wildlife sanctuary. So that's good to see the lions are doing well. And the last thing, which is most definitely going to be in the thumbnail for this, is some baby shark information. And this is about zebra sharks in Indonesia. We'll put a photo of zebra sharks. They are rare and overhunted and at risk of extinction, but 44 aquariums in 15 countries will create a large captive breeding and release program to reintroduce 500 sharks. So that's a really good thing to hear. And this sort of effort has never been done before. And this sort of rewilding is usually done for terrestrial species, not for ocean species. So it's pretty intriguing to think about aquariums and zoos putting resources into doing big projects like this to regenerate animals quickly in a large scale. And it would be fantastic to see places make that more of the norm, to have zoos be places where you're using them to actively regenerate species instead of just sort of keeping them there for people to see. And then people can see what efforts are going on globally. So that is us for this week. Thank you for sticking around. It's been a windy road this week, but we've had some good times. And I will now bid you adieu. Have a great week, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.